Almost every writing tutorial and course tells you the exact same advice. Show don't tell, avoid adverbs, cut out your darlings. But nobody talks about the 5 categories of problems that actually make manuscripts feel amateur. The good thing though is that they're way more fixable than you think. If you Google writing mistakes, you'll find the same recycled advice everywhere, even more so now thanks to AI-generated slop. But the real problems that separate amateur from professional writing aren't about grammar or adverbs, they're deeper craft issues. That's why today we're breaking down 5 categories of writing problems that literary agents and editors can spot instantly and how to fix them. If you're new here, my name is Brianna and I post writing videos every Sunday that help you become a better writer. I also make easy-to-use writing workbooks that help you build and outline your novel from start to finish, so if you're interested, check them out in my Etsy shop, Planner Palette Co, linked in the description below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. So the first category is plot and structure issues, which can be broken down into 4 sub-issues. The first being lack of causation or flow. And this is where events feel random instead of connected through cause and effect. Things happen because the plot needs them to, not because previous events made them inevitable. So to fix this, you can list out your major plot events. Between each one, write therefore or but. If you find that you have to write and then instead, then you have a causation problem and you need to figure out what happens in those previous events that lead to the next and why. One way is to try to create connections through character decisions that backfire or unintended consequences. The second sub-issue is skipping the best parts. Amateur writing tends to summarize dramatic moments that they should actually dramatize while dwelling on the mundane setup beforehand. The fix for this is easy though. Slow down during emotionally important moments and speed past repetitive actions or transitions. Give dramatic moments page time that's proportional to their emotional weight. The third sub-issue is having an unclear scene purpose. Essentially, your scenes exist, but too many of them either don't advance the plot, reveal character, or build tension in some way. These are often called filler scenes, which are scenes that don't push the story forward in some way and are only there, really, to add to the word count. Every scene should advance your plot, develop character, add to the world building, or create tension. Ideally all 4, but if a scene doesn't accomplish at least 2 of these things, you should cut it or combine it with another scene. And the fourth sub-issue is having no escalation, so your conflicts stay at the same or similar level of intensity instead of getting progressively worse, and this applies to both your main plots and your subplots. Each obstacle should be harder than the last. Don't let your character catch their breath until the climax, unless there's a reason for it. Now the caveat here is with literary fiction because sometimes literary fiction intentionally uses episodic structure. However, it should still maintain the thematic escalation. The second overarching category is having weak dialogue mechanics. Sometimes the reason a story's dialogue feels weak is because it fails to layer in the many aspects that come with dialogue. That's because dialogue is directly influenced by the people who are engaged in it. And people, as you know, are multifaceted and don't always converse in straightforward ways. So the first dialogue sub-issue is having characters who are asking and answering purely for the reader's benefit. This is the dreaded, as you know Bob, exposition, where characters tell each other information they already know. So the only real reason they're saying it is because the author is using dialogue to remind the reader of certain information. The problem is that if 2 characters already know something, they won't explicitly remind each other of it unless they genuinely have to. They might instead reference it through smaller moments or details that they didn't previously talk about. So you want to reveal information then through conflict about what it means, through corrections, or through someone else who genuinely doesn't know. Your readers will be able to infer context. The second sub-issue is that everyone speaks in complete sentences. Amateur dialogue is perfectly grammatical, but real conversation includes fragments, interruptions, trailing off, and overlapping speech. So to fix it, incorporate more mid-sentence interruptions with em-dashes, fragments that capture natural rhythms, and moments where characters talk past each other or they get lost in thought and trail off. All these things also add to your characters' personalities and typical speech patterns. Now, you don't have to make every line of dialogue imperfect, but you also don't want every line to be perfect. There should be a balance. And the third dialogue sub-issue is that you're missing oblique responses. Sometimes the strongest dialogue comes from body language and the space between what people say and what they actually think or feel. Real people deflect, evade, or deliberately answer something other than what was asked. Your characters shouldn't always respond to conversations like a robot. How they speak will be influenced by what they feel. So let your characters dodge questions, mishear things, or deliberately misinterpret. Create subtext through the gaps between questions and answers. That said, the genre you're writing in also affects the style of dialogue you use. Historical novels typically use formal speech, fantasy uses more elevated language, and contemporary often uses the current vernacular. But you can still achieve these styles in your dialogue without everyone sounding the same. Again, it all comes down to your character's distinct personalities and voices. The third main category is having a lack of character and emotional depth. And there are four sub issues with this, the first being an underwritten internal life. The plot happens, your characters react with surface level emotion, and then the plot continues. We never actually get deep into their head. You want to layer in what your character thinks about events. What memories does it trigger? What fears surface? What internal conflicts emerge? Readers benefit from that stuff because they need emotional connection in order to have a reason to care about what's happening to these characters. The second sub issue is emotional telling instead of subtext, where characters announce their feelings like, I'm so mad at you, or I'm terrified. People rarely make statements about how they're feeling, especially during intense moments when their emotions are at their peak. You want to instead show emotions through physical reactions and contradictions between words and actions. If they're mad, describe how they're getting choked up or hitting something or gnashing their teeth or going dead silent. This is how you create subtext through the gaps between what's said and what's done. The third sub-issue is missing moral stakes. And this is when a story has physical danger but no ethical dilemmas. No choice between two bad options or values that are questioned. And this goes back to the idea of layering, right? A story shouldn't be just one line that goes from A to Z. It should have multiple lines that loop and weave and intersect as they travel from A to Z, and some lines might not even make it to Z. But the goal is that there's more than just one line. So your story should have more than just physical stakes. So you can fix this by adding morally difficult choices. Not just survive or die, but save this person or save that person. Or achieve your goals through questionable means or give up. When you incorporate this, you'll find that you're also building up the thematic elements of your story. These morally difficult moments underscore the message and theme that you're trying to push. And the fourth sub-issue is having a flat emotional range. And this builds upon my point about missing oblique dialogue responses. This is where your characters only truly express the more visceral emotions, anger, sadness, maybe determination as well. People experience emotions like drinking cocktails, not just downing straight hard shots. There are so many external and internal factors that affect the way someone is feeling at a given time, and you need to convey that same emotional complexity within your characters. So when you're writing an emotional scene, show the layers of how they're feeling. Someone can be simultaneously relieved, guilty, angry, and terrified. Show us that. Now, depending on your genre, how much you focus on your emotional range can vary. Thrillers, for example, tend to move faster than literary fiction, which spends more time on emotion. But regardless, all stories need emotional grounding, because emotion is one of the foundational pillars of a great story. The fourth category is craft level problems, and these are the finer level technical details that tend to arise particularly in new writers who are working on their first or second book, or writers who might not even be aware to look out for these issues. The first sub-issue is having confusing narrative logic, so readers can't follow the sequencing of your events, spatial relationships, that being how readers visualize and interpret the narration, or they're struggling to keep track of who's doing what in a scene. You want to ground your readers in the space with a brief passage describing the scene before the action and chaos starts. And use blocking to keep your readers oriented. And blocking refers to describing a character's movements and interactions within a scene to help visualize what's happening. The second sub-issue is having the wrong point of view information. And the way this typically happens is when characters know things that they shouldn't, or they don't react to things that they would notice. The fix is to stay in your narrator's head, whether you're writing in third person limited, multiple, omniscient, or first person. The character whose head you're in can only know what they perceive or deduce themselves. If you find sentences revealing information that your point of view character couldn't possibly know, highlight them and figure out how to rework them so that they logically align with their perspective. The second sub-issue is overusing the word suddenly. And this one is hard because I feel like it's so ingrained in us to just say, suddenly this happened, because it feels like a signifier to the reader that something spontaneous is happening. But when you add in that signifier, it acts more like a preemptive warning to brace themselves, rather than letting the words hit them full on with that instant surprise. It weakens the impact. Suddenly the door burst open reads weaker than just starting a new line with the door burst open. So in most instances, you want to delete this word because it's a crutch word. Let the action itself convey the surprise. Again, this is in most instances, not all. Sometimes suddenly is the right word, but oftentimes it's not. It's up to you to decide which is the case. The next sub issue is having misplaced modifiers. And these are words that are placed too far from the word they're describing in a sentence, which makes the meaning of the sentence confusing and often creates unintentionally funny or strange mental images. For example, we saw a cool tree driving home suggests that the tree is driving home. So to fix this, you want to place your modifiers next to what they modify or add in a conjunction. So driving home, we saw a cool tree. Or we saw a cool tree while driving home. And the last sub issue for this category is non-action emphasis. And this is where you incorporate words like starting to, beginning to, trying to. These weaken your prose by slowing down the pacing and cluttering the narrative with unnecessary words. She walked is much more concise than she started to walk. So search for these phrases in your draft, and in most cases, you can just delete them. That said, it depends on the scene. If she starts to walk but is then interrupted, then that is a valid use case and you don't have to delete the started to part. And the fifth and last main category is having weak stakes and tension. The first sub-issue here being overly comfortable characters. So your protagonist gets breaks from all the high pressure when in reality the tension should stay constant. Even in moments of rest, the threat and fear and anxiety of the conflict should still be looming over everyone's heads. It doesn't just disappear because they're chillin' laughing by the campfire. You want to maintain that underlying tension by having them deal with unresolved side conflicts, incorporate the feeling of having a ticking clock, or let your characters reflect on their worries in conversation during those moments of rest. For the most part, they shouldn't have a moment of real, genuine comfort until after the climax. The second sub-issue is having vague character goals. Basically, your characters just want abstract, immeasurable things like be happy or find love, instead of concrete objectives built by their backstory and role in the current story and main conflict. Make their goals specific and measurable, just like you would if you were to set a goal for yourself in real life. Not find love, but convince Sarah to give me a second chance before she moves next week. The latter goal highlights the stakes and tension because you're adding conflict, she's moving, and a ticking clock. They only have a week to convince her. And the last sub-issue is that your prose lacks specificity when you have moments of tension. So this is when your prose incorporates too many generic descriptions so that the reader doesn't get a true sense of the stakes or the tension. For example, you have a character who's afraid of dogs after being attacked by a chihuahua. The line says, "A hungry dog limped into the room." This is too generic because, sure, we know they're afraid of dogs, but we don't get that feeling of fear or anxiety from them. A stronger line could be something like, "A scraggly red-eyed chihuahua limped in, hackles raised. Its gaze darted hungrily around the room before locking onto me." In this moment, regardless if the chihuahua is actually dangerous or just afraid, we get a narration that's colored with this character's perspective that chihuahuas are dangerous, and the one they see now looks hungry, aggressive, and ready to attack them. So to fix this, find and replace your generic nouns and replace them with specific ones. Don't just write a car when you can write a rusted Ford pickup. This adds detail and realism to your setting that makes it easier for readers to visualize it. That said, you also want to avoid too much specificity because that can bog down your pacing. Use it strategically for important moments that you want to highlight or to better establish the mood or ambiance. So those are the 5 main categories that separate amateur writing from professional writing. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you might want to watch this one next. And tell me, which category do you struggle with the most? Until the next chapter.